Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Dan Hiscock, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Major Jonathan Lawson. Tomorrow marks the commencement of the first sitting period for the 48th Parliament of Australia. We pause here in the commemorative area of the Australian War Memorial and reflect on the freedoms afforded to us as Australians. Freedoms underpinned by those who serve and those who have served our nation in the Australian Defence Force. At the opposite end of Anzac Parade from the Parliament, this institution and the stories it tells remind us what it means to be Australian, committed to one another and to this nation. Here with us this evening are the men and women elected by Australians to make decisions that build and protect our nation, including the deployment of members of the Australian Defence Force across the globe. The roll of honour cloaking us reminds us of the cost of those decisions, as does the physical and emotional toll on those who have served. As the members of Parliament commence the sitting period, your presence here speaks to every Australian of the deep responsibility to never forget individual sacrifices made in our name, devotion to duty and our country. This evening we are honoured to acknowledge the Honourable Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia, the Honourable Susan Lee, Leader of the Federal Opposition, and all members and senators of the 48th Parliament of Australia who are joining us this evening. We are also honoured to acknowledge Admiral David Johnston, Chief of the Defence Force, Brigadier Phil Winter, representing the National President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, Ms Sharon Bound, representing the Chair of the Council of the Australian War Memorial, fellow member of the Australian War Memorials Council, Mr Glenn Keys, and Mr Matt Anderson, Director of the Australian War Memorial. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Service Clubs Association, and we welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by guests of the memorial and students on behalf of St Oliver Plunkett School visiting from Cannon Hill, Queensland. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier.
Party, Revive! Carnival Party, rest on!
I would now like to invite the Honourable Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister of Australia, to the lectern.
I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge the Leader of the Opposition and all my colleagues from across the Parliament. Admiral David Johnson, Chief of the Defence Force. Brigadier Philip Winter, representing the National President of the RSL. Sharon Bone, representing the Chair of the Council of the Australian War Memorial. Matt Anderson, the Director of the Australian War Memorial. Vice Admiral Mark Hammond, the Chief of Navy. Lieutenant General Simon Stewart, Chief of Army. And Air Vice Marshal Harvey Reynolds, representing the Chief of the Air Force. If only these walls could speak. It's a familiar figure of speech, one that holds within it the strength of our yearning to touch the past, to know all that has gone into building the present. Close your eyes for a moment and let these walls speak to you. Let them speak to you through the constellations of names arrayed upon them. Let them tell you about generations of Australian sacrifice, of courage, of resilience, of suffering and fear. Not some lofty ideal, but stories of flesh and blood, of ordinary people facing the extraordinary, of victory and of loss, of mateship tempered in the fire of combat, and the light of humanity refusing to be dimmed even in the most pitiless darkness. Like every cenotaph and war memorial right across Australia, from the biggest city to the smallest country town, and so many military cemeteries around the world, these walls tell us the strength of the Australian character and how it has been tested and proven time and time again. Here we feel the weight of history, yet our hearts are lifted by all that Australians have stood against and the difference they have made in the world. Every name recorded at the Australian War Memorial reminds us of all we owe to every Australian who has served in our name, every Australian who fell, every Australian who came home but never fully left the battle, and every Australian who serves our nation now. Every military family that has shouldered the weight, every family that has known the pride of a loved one who has taken on the responsibility of wearing our uniform, and every family that has known that grief which has no ending, only a beginning. Not every final resting place is mapped out in this atlas of loss. It is a gulf we acknowledge with the extraordinary grave we are gathered before, the tomb that is the final resting place for one of our fallen, brought home from the Western Front to stand for every Australian cast into the ranks of the unknown soldier. We gather here on the eve of the new Parliament for the same reason Parliament House and the Australian War Memorial face each other across our capital. It is because the spirit of democracy that our national parliament embodies is built upon the spirit that permeates these very walls. A spirit that, even in the face of the fiercest challenge, never relinquishes what it means to be Australian. A spirit that holds within it the determination that the power of the ballot, our collective voice as a people, must never yield to the power of the bullet. Even in the depths of World War II, Australians in uniform voted. Whether they were in besieged Britain or in the jungles of Papua New Guinea, where ballot papers were airdropped to remote units, our soldiers, sailors and aviators kept the heartbeat of our democracy strong, a beacon of hope held high to a world darkened by tyranny. Each day delivers a stark reminder of just how elusive peace can be. Yet, as the walls around us remind us, peace is a cause we can never resolve from. Look to the constellations of names above us. Like the stars in the night sky, so many of those names and the lives they stood for are so distant from us now, yet their light touches us all. Even as the late afternoon gathers our land in shadows, it is a light upon which no darkness will fall. Like an eternal flame of the heart, we tend the fire of memory so that its glow touches generations to come. And we keep returning to three words, as perfect in their simplicity as they are profound in their power, lest we forget.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I now invite the Honourable Susan Lee, Leader of the Federal Opposition, to the lectern.
Prime Minister, my parliamentary colleagues, distinguished guests. At the outset of another parliamentary term, we gather here as Australians. We gather to remember, to recognise and reflect. We gather to remember those we have lost. We gather to recognise the sacrifice they have made for us, and we gather to reflect on the duty we owe them. Australians are practical people. We are sceptical of ceremony. We don't hold stock with airs and graces. But here, in this place, that humble Australian character is set aside. Here in this place, in this cathedral of stone and bronze, as Australians, we feel the tug of our national spirit. We feel that tug because here at the Australian War Memorial, we are reminded of the price of our freedom. We feel it because it is here, in our most sacred place, we gather to keep that sacred promise we make to our fallen, that we will remember them. In this, the seat of our national soul, we stand surrounded by words etched into rock. Words etched by the deeds of Australians into our national story. Gallipoli, Flanders, Papua New Guinea, Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan. These words matter to Australians. These sites of Australian struggle matter. And so too do the many other lonely, forgotten places, places often marked today by a simple white cross or an Australian rising sun. These were the battlefields where Australians stood up for what was right and fell fighting for a fairer and freer future. Places where the world shaped Australians and Australians shaped the world, where Australians refused to accept the world as it was and fought to make it the world they wanted it to be. Because Australians never accept the world as it is. We toil to build a better tomorrow. In this place, we are flanked by our roll of honour too. These names forged in bronze enshrine the service and sacrifice of our greatest Australians. 103,000 names, 103,000 Australians, 103,000 of us. This peaceful place creates the space for us to honour our fallen, and it rightly sits within direct sight of our national parliament. The solemn silence of these stones is so rarely broken, perhaps by the whispers of children, the call of a bird, or the loud, clear ring of a bugle. But if you listen closely in this quiet courtyard of contemplation, the words and names that surround us thunder. They tell our national story. They speak of a debt paid in the pursuit of peace, a debt paid to make a better world, a debt paid by Australians for Australians. These important words tell our most important story. Can you hear them? Can you hear the stories? Can you smell the mud of Pozieres? Can you feel the thud of bullets flying through the scrub at Long Tan? Can you taste the Uruzgan dust? Can you hear the trench whistle as another wave charges into the hellfire of the Somme? Or the thrum of the engines amid bursts of tracer as a Lancaster bomber rounds its target? Can you feel the flash of heat and light and searing pain as one of our diggers takes on fire amid the rock and shale of the valley's edge? The adrenaline, the fear, the guilt, the joy of victory, the depth of loss. Friends, it is not enough for us to simply read the names and words around us. It is not enough to recall the deeds of heroism and service. It is not enough to read their names, because they are not just names. They were Australians, and we can never forget the horrors they confronted to keep us safe. As Charles Bean said in conceiving these hallowed halls of service and remembrance, many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia, they will be proud of this. Friends, we have to hear their stories. We have to feel those moments. And in so doing, we must understand the depth of that contribution they made to the peaceful world they delivered us. This memorial and this moment connects us to their experience. We have to seek meaning from these great Australians and the sacrifices they have made. And we have to recommit ourselves to the project they safeguarded. That means honouring them and telling their stories. It means looking after their families and their mates. And it means supporting those who live on with the scars of their service. It also means stepping up to protect the hard-won world their sacrifice helped create. We must be willing to bear the costs to keep their hard-won peace. They rose to meet their moment, and we must steel ourselves to meet ours too. But today, we can say without doubt, as Australians, we are proud of them. As Australians, we honour them. And as Australians, we will remember them, lest we forget.
Thank you. Now, if you're able, I invite you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Rejoice, for we are one and free.
If you wish to and you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection in the following order. The Honourable Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister of Australia, and the Honourable Susan Lee, Leader of the Federal Opposition. Senator, the Honourable Sue Lyons, President of the Senate, and the Honourable Milton Dick, Speaker of the House of Representatives. The Honourable Richard Marles, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence, and the Honourable Angus Taylor, Shadow Minister for Defence. The Honourable Matt Keogh, Minister for Veterans Affairs and Minister for Defence Personnel, and the Honourable Darren Chester, Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs. The Honourable Pat Conroy, Minister for Defence Industry and Minister for Pacific Island Affairs, and Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa Price, Shadow Minister for Defence Industry and Shadow Minister for Defence Personnel. The Honourable Peter Khalil, Assistant Minister for Defence, and Mr Phil Thompson, Shadow Assistant Minister for Defence, and Mr Luke Gosling, Special Envoy for Defence, Veterans Affairs and Northern Australia. Admiral David Johnston, Chief of the Defence Force, and Brigadier Phil Winter, representing the National President of the Return and Services League of Australia. Ms Sharon Bown, representing the Chair of the Council of the Australian War Memorial, and Mr Matt Anderson, Director of the Australian War Memorial. The final wreaths this evening will now be laid by visitors to the memorial.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Walter Henry Fagg. Walter Fagg and his twin brother Alan were born in Temora, New South Wales on the 26th of November 1918 to Bertha and James Fagg. Walter and Alan moved to Adelaide with their family when they were young and attended Edwardstown School. Walter joined the Scouts at the age of 9 and was later the Assistant Scoutmaster of the 1st Ascot Park Troop. Alan went on to work as an electrician, joined the militia in December 1939, and then the 2nd Australian Imperial Force in 1943. He saw service as a signalman before returning to his family after the war. Walter Fagg enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force at Adelaide on the 23rd of May 1940. Allotted to the newly established 2nd 27th Infantry Battalion, he entered camp at Woodside and began training. There was a short break in Private Fagg's training as he married Ida Joyce Hendry in Edwardstown on the 29th of June 1940. After a brief honeymoon, Walter Fagg then managed a further period of pre-embarkation leave to spend with his bride in September. The following month, he and his battalion travelled to Melbourne, where they embarked on the troop ship Mauritania, bound for active overseas service. Fagg and the 2nd 27th disembarked in Egypt in late November and then moved to Palestine to complete their training. As part of the 21st Brigade of the 7th Division, the 2nd 27th's first operational assignment was to bolster the defences along the Egypt-Libya frontier against an expected German attack. Meanwhile, Fagg's daughter Beverly was born in Australia on the 6th of April 1941. He would never have the opportunity to meet her. On the 10th of April 1941, the 2nd 27th Battalion left their camp at Dimra near Gaza and headed west, crossing the Nile at Kantara. The next day, they arrived at a staging camp near Alexandria in Egypt. After a few days there, the battalion moved on by train along the coast, arriving at Mersa Matra in Egypt's western desert on the 17th. They remained there for the rest of April. Private Walter Fagg was declared missing towards the end of the month. It would be some time before his fate was determined. A court of inquiry eventually concluded that he'd been killed instantly on the 29th of April 1941 when he stepped on a mine. There were no eyewitnesses and no blame apportioned. Walter Fagg was 22 years old. Initially buried where he fell, his remains were later reinterred in El Alamein War Cemetery, where they rest today under the inscription chosen by his grieving family, "Peace, perfect peace." Walter Fagg's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left amongst 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Walter Henry Fagg, who gave his life for us, our freedoms, and the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Party, reason, Party, showtime,
Lest we forget.
Party, in Western. Catapult party, quick march.
We'll leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, the staff and the volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.